actually it is not so easy to get a delivery boy, right? Who in the they have their expectations. I want to get at least, let's say, $800 per day or $1,000 per day. There's like that expectations are there. So we've kind of said we will also expand our pool to add new supply to the delivery boy supply that exists in these cities by actually going and doing rural migration.
Hey Raghu, welcome to the AJVC podcast.
Hi Aviral, hi Mazin, a pleasure to be here.
Raghu, we'll start with our first question. What's one truth you believe in, which very few people agree with you on?
See, I think on this one, I am now a early 40s founder. I started when I was in my late 30s. But I've just felt that most people, including some very close friends of mine, they overestimate risk, and therefore kind of they have interesting ideas, they have the right skill sets, I believe, but they just don't take the plunge into entrepreneurship, saying, "Yaar, abhi thoda bude ho gaye, right? We are a little older. There are so many other priorities in life. We have families, we have kids who are growing up, and therefore we are not doing it." I think my personal thing is, I think entrepreneurship and being a high performance senior executive, there are not too many differences for you to think about this being a barrier, or age being a barrier, or stage of life being a barrier to not starting up. In fact, I think that there are advantages to starting up a little later. And that's a place where I've obviously had many debates with my friends. Yeah, there is so many, priorities that we have on the family side. Entrepreneurship is going to be all consuming. Therefore, we can't do it at this stage. Maybe we miss the bus. I truly think that there are, if you reframe it in a way that says, look, you're, financially, you don't need to be you're not at a point where you just don't have, you have savings only for a few months, right? I mean, most people are reasonably okay off on that front. And you have a lot of experience, you have a lot of ideas, you have a network, you have people that are willing to even back you, right? If you just go out there. So therefore, I think that's one place where I do think that risk is overstated. At max, even if you start something and if it doesn't take off, it's not even an opportunity cost of 2 years, right? Because you will realize if it's not taking off in a couple of years, and you are eminently going to be employable at that point. You will have learned a bunch of things that I don't think a regular job would have given you so much exposure to. And yeah, it's just an overstated risk on what is going to happen in those 2 years that holds people back, right? So I think that's a point of view, which is the thought process that I had, and I had many sleepless nights before my decision to start off. But I kind of made peace, and I reasoned out in this particular manner for myself, and I articulate the same for whoever is thinking and saying, yeah, I'm a little too late to start off. I think it's absolutely not the case.
There's no right age to starting. I guess that is what you're saying.
Correct.
As well.
Correct.
No, fascinating, and would love to talk about your early days when you started. Um, just went to college. How did that happen? Why did you choose to do engineering? You ended up at IIT Delhi. And also do touch upon one very key aspect, which is you learned how to swim, which seems a bit like a random thing to talk about, but I think in this context, it's super helpful. So can you talk about early days,
Sure.
growing up, your IIT days, and then decision to do an MBA,
Yeah.
and obviously swimming?
Sure. So I am originally from Andhra. I grew up in a place which is in Guntur district. And early years, my father used to work for a PSU that was based in Ranchi in Jharkhand, erstwhile Bihar, right? And so early years were in Ranchi. And then he used to work in projects, so we used to kind of lug along with him to wherever he went. And I ended up
Right.
spending 6 years till like middle of 10th class in a place called Dankuni in West Bengal, which
Okay.
incidentally is
Okay.
now a logistics hub, right? I mean, this is how crazily dots connect in life, right? So,
Wow.
and Dankuni
Okay.
is a place where we have one of our largest warehouses as well. It's the center of
Where
action.
is Dankuni, by the
It's
way? Like,
it's like maybe 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers from Kolkata.
okay.
Yeah,
Understood.
so back in the day, nobody knew about it. Now everybody in logistics, I can bet whoever has worked in logistics in India will know Dankuni.
Hmm.
In fact, there's one of these Davos presentations of India investment deck, right? In that you'll find India map, in
Hmm.
that Dankuni is mentioned. So
Oh
Dankuni is a
wow.
yeah,
Yes.
so it's become so central.
Right.
So I grew up in Dankuni till 10th, moved back to Ranchi from Dankuni because we felt like, that was one of the important inflection points in my life. My mother just took the call to move back at that time while my
Hmm.
father was still working in Dankuni, saying, your 10th, you can't compromise education. That was, I think, a fairly important bearing on my life
Hmm.
subsequently because Ranchi had a very good educational setup. And then the choice of engineering was pretty much default, right? I mean, this was an engineering colony that I was growing up in, and
Right.
it was assumed, right, that, like, I mean, I don't know how things are now in that place, but back in the
Hmm.
day, it was pretty much standard. Ki, engineering.
Probably will be the same.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
don't think
guess
it would
so.
have
I
changed.
don't think it would have changed, right? That mindset is
Yeah.
hard to shake off, and
Hmm.
it has worked well in some cases. In most cases, I would say.
Of course, of
Yeah,
course. I mean, I think these mindsets are created to ensure economic and
correct,
social mobility. So
correct,
it
correct, correct.
works.
Exactly. So then, I mean, engineering was like a default thing, and then you study and you study with purpose to objective to go into IIT, and that's what kind of was pretty much standard for me. So I went to IIT Delhi. The choice of IIT Delhi was a little different because
Hmm.
I had a chance to go to IIT Delhi earlier once in my life, and I saw kids outside just playing cricket and just like it didn't seem like a fun place. So I
Yeah.
said, "ये तो अच्छा जगह लग रहा है, right? यहाँ पर let me try and kind of see it. So it seems interesting." So I just made the choice to
Hmm.
go there, and yeah, four
How
years.
simple our decision making frameworks were as
Yeah,
kids, man. I
yeah,
wish I wish we
yeah,
could do it. Like
yeah.
यहाँ लोग cricket खेलते हैं hence. Yeah,
Yeah.
we could.
So it seemed like to like just to broaden it, I felt like it was a more high exposure thing, and I really
Hmm.
wanted to kind of having stayed in
Like a large
smaller.
city
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
metro.
Correct, correct,
Hmm.
exactly, right. In staying in smaller cities, I think like let's get the exposure of a larger city, right? And I think
So you
really
went to the second best IIT after Bombay, of course.
that's what.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't argue on statistics. I had no idea back then, and I said, "Look, chalo, theek hai."
Just joking.
Yeah, I know. But I felt that was a great time just from an exposure angle. I just got exposed to so many different aspects, right? I think just the extracurricular life, sporting life was, I would say, more buzzing than my academic life, and I really made the
Hmm.
most of it. And then uh, for me, the choice, I graduated, and then I had a job offer with a company called I2 Technologies, supply chain software company. Again, if I look back, the dots connect because that was a supply chain logistics company, which I think was at that time pretty ahead of its time, right? And
Right.
I worked as a software engineer for 1 year, and I think I learned the learning curve there was pretty phenomenal. But I was very clear that I don't see myself as a coder, and I therefore took the
And this
cab.
is back in the early 2000s,
It's
right?
early
Just post
2000s.
the dot com,
Yeah,
post
yeah,
the
it's
dot
around,
com.
yeah, exactly, just after that, right? So,
Hmm.
and I felt like MBA karna chahiye. That was again the
Hmm.
default thing was either you go to the US to pursue some further education, technical education, or you go for an MBA, right? So you throw in a year or a couple of years of work experience in between, but that's like the general thought, again, simplistic thought process back then. So after I2, I went to IIM Lucknow, and then I joined Accenture. I spent 3 years in Accenture as a consultant. Then I moved to McKinsey. Again, that was another point where I was kind of thinking of what next to do. And that time there were a bunch of things that were coming up on the early private equity side, so it seemed interesting,
Right.
but I just felt that consulting had a lot of learning variety, things that I would have benefited from at that stage in life. So went to McKinsey from there, spent around 7.5 years, half of which was in India, half of which was in Dubai in the Middle East.
Okay.
And 2014, I had come for a batch get together to India, and that's a point at which uh, I was a consultant because I just was still figuring out what is it that really excites me, right? And what is interesting
Right.
enough outside, and which would throw some variety, some learning, all of those things that consulting is kind of well regarded for, I would say. Rather than saying I want to be a career consultant, I think that was absolutely not a thought process from my side at all. But just and then 2014 when I came here, end of 2014 is when there was so much of buzz about India startups, Flipkart, Amazon, all of these companies, Myntra. I just felt like this is what is something that I'm looking forward to. This is the one that this is the sunrise sector. This is what seems exciting enough, and this is where I could see back then how big it could become and how relevant it would become to India. And especially when I like again going back to my my early days, I could see the power of e-commerce in transforming commerce in some of the smaller towns, right? And that was a particularly exciting thing for me, just to imagine the possibilities that it would throw up, right? And therefore, at that point, went to Myntra. But yeah, just coming back to the swimming thing, I was always quite interested in sports. Tried my hand at most sports, including like long distance run in marathons and all. And then I had a friend of mine who told me, was a very dear friend. The reason I went and did a marathon is because he told me one day that I'm doing this Mumbai marathon. I said, if this guy can do it, I can also do it, right? So that was my thought process. And then I kind of did train for it and went into that side of or that sport. And then one day he told me that he's done a triathlon, right? And the triathlon involved doing a like a longish swim in an open water. I said, ये कर सकता
Right.
है तो मैं भी कर सकता हूँ, right? So I said, let me go in for this. And when I went for it, I think the first time I went, I said, let me go with a swimathon. And there's a place near Bangalore called Tonur. I
Hmm.
said, let me go there. My family was along with me. And I just, said, okay, let me go and, I should be able to do it. The moment I went this is an open water lake, right? The moment I went into the lake, I just felt I would die, right? It was just a very powerful, very visceral feeling, right? That look, it is, oh my God, this is like and I went a little bit in, right? It's not that just when I tipped my toes that happened. And then I
Right.
felt, look, this is the scariest thing I've done in my life. So I basically, that day, I backtracked and said, look, I just can't do it. The whole night, I stayed up watching videos on YouTube on how to swim in open water. And next day, I just said, let me, like, families here, it's going to be, quite embarrassing if I tell them I'm scared, right? Small kid also around. So I said, chalo chalte hain wahan par. Then I said, let me go two steps in, two steps in, two steps in. Ultimately went in, and there was a point when I felt, okay, now it's okay. I'm not going to die, right? And and then I felt like I'm doing it reasonably well, right? And that was a very important inflection point in my life where I felt like this is. And while I was doing it, I was kind of thinking about the whole parallels between a job, and that is also coincidentally the time when I was thinking about entrepreneurship, right? And I felt like this is so similar. And literally, I would say at the end of that swim, I made up my mind that I will try out, because the whole while I was swimming, this is all I was thinking about, right? All these things that I told about, like, at this stage in life, should I be doing it? Should I not be doing it? How quote unquote dangerous is it to do something like this? And I think that clarified it for me. And since then, I have just absolutely loved this sport, right? And I do think there are many significant parallels between open water swimming and a swimming pool. And I just now I do swim once in a while. I don't do as much of it, thanks to every year since then I've been going to this place called Tonur. It's like an annual pilgrimage for me. Past 2 3 years it's not happening because of COVID. I'm looking forward to when it restarts. But every time I step into a swimming pool, it just I miss the adrenaline rush that I get and the excitement that I get when I kind of go into a sea, right? So, or sea or a lake, right? So, yeah, that's one thing I think which early days, just, yeah, sports, and then one thing leading to another, and then trying out this open water thing. And I think it's got profound, and even now I use it as a framework of sorts, right? When I go into some tricky situations, how to deal with it. right? Because again, like the parallels between that and swimming are just so strong, and parallels between entrepreneurship and open water swimming are just so strong for me.
Versus the corporate environment, which is more like swimming in a
Yeah,
pool.
yeah. So
And
look, exactly right. So you can be a good swimmer, and I've seen like when I used to go for these events, there used to be guys who would knock off like straight 2 3K in a pool every single day. Like they are very fit, very toned, very very good swimmers, but they would go a little bit inside and come out. And it is not for lack of capability, right? It is just because I think there is no, like, you can't see the bottom of the pool. There is
right.
nothing to clutch onto. They don't need it, by the way. They don't need it. But it's
They're
just that
capable, but
mental thing that
yeah, it's
they're
just
capable,
you
but it's
want
just
your
that,
feet to touch the bottom.
yeah, you need to
I
you
love
need to
that.
know that you are safe, right? Whereas you just don't need that safety in some sense. You can always swim your way out of that trouble.
You can always get
But
another job.
it just, and you can't, like, literally, people think like, in a swimming pool you can see pretty much like not just what you're doing, but maybe other people around you also, right, underwater. But when you're swimming in a lake or a sea, you just can't see your hand in front of you, right? So it is, in some sense, that fear and that thing is real. But I think you just have to condition your mind to move out of. There are waves and there are things that are currents that you can't control, right? You just, and when there's like tough currents or the like tides that are coming, you just can't, in no way can you kind of beat them, right? So you have to figure out how do you make peace with
Work
the
with it.
fact that you just don't need to be constantly hustling and burning up energy, and just kind of go a little bit with the flow, literally, right? So I think, so that's a that's a mindset that is different, nothing else, right? So again, in a regular job, you can be a high performance executive, you can do everything well, and which is why if you just get some tweaks to your mindset, you can be a fairly good entrepreneur as well, right? It's just those small little tweaks that are the difference.
You need to know how to adjust with the currents and
Exactly.
you know. And on that note, I think it's a good time to maybe talk about. You spoke a lot about how you kind of connected the dots retrospectively, but can you walk us through that thought process of how did you come up with the initial idea for LoadShare?
Yeah. Yeah. So look, so after McKinsey, I moved to Myntra, and in Myntra, my role was to head customer experience. And customer experience in e-commerce, the largest determinant of customer experience is the last mile delivery, right? So I would say 70% of what I was dealing with and what I was kind of exposed to, and what I was doing problem solving on was on that side, right? The last mile delivery side. And I just felt that there are, while uh, things are fairly good, I would say, right? And again, just to put it in perspective, 2011 I actually left India to go to Dubai. And at that time, the state of logistics India was so bad that people, like, there was in fact 2011, I lost my passport because I gave it to a courier guy and he basically lost the passport itself, right? And that was my reference frame of logistics of how it was in 2011. And 2015, when I came and saw Myntra, I was just blown away by the sophistication of logistics that existed already. So you could see how technology has made a huge difference, and you could see what are further opportunities as you go deeper and deeper. Right, in 2015, still e-commerce was still scratching the surface. So I felt that there is I naturally gravitated towards logistics, given there is scale, there is, you can see a opportunity for technology to make a meaningful difference. And you could just see that there are a variety of problems to be solved, right? Which is, you solve them, and there is some, kind of value creation that kind of is associated with solving those problems. So I could see that that's a place where I wanted to invest more time and figure out what could be done differently over there, because it was like right there, every day kind of a problem that I was being exposed to. And that's when I thought in a few different things, a few different takes to what to do on logistics. Right now, number one, it was very clear. Now it became, I think, 2019, 18, people started talking about Bharat and how that's a bigger opportunity. We could see it right in the beginning, and in particular Northeast, right, where we used to pay an arm and a leg for logistic services. It would be delivered very terribly by whoever were partners, logistics partners we'd be working with. In fact, customers would come to the delivery hub to collect the shipments, right? The delivery boy would not even go out, right? That was the state of logistics back then over there. And I felt like this had to change, right? And this is a massive opportunity of providing a good experience in some of these tier two locations. And I could clearly see massive demand shaping up over there, and underserviced, highly underserved, right? So that was one place where to focus on underserved regions was at least the big theme that was for me a plank or a pillar on which I would construct. I would think about what's the new thing that or what's the big thing that could be done. Second was back then there were also, like, this is a time when a lot of small logistics companies were having an existential crisis. It still continues in some sense, but back then there were, there used to be a time when postpaid bills used to be delivered to customers. That was a big business, big kind of lots of things that used to be done. And these guys had a presence in every kind of nook and corner of the country, but just didn't have the technology or the know-how to be able to absorb and apply that for e-commerce, right? Or e-commerce deliveries. So one big thought process, the other pillar was to say, can we work with these small logistics entrepreneurs all over the country who are also, who understand, who have the skill sets again, right? But just don't have something missing, where if you can complement them and build a network on top of them, primarily using technology, that's a great kind of capital efficient and a very innovative way to solve the logistics problem, right? So that was the other big kind of pillar or idea based on which we do. And so these were the two primary ones. And the third one was e-commerce sophistication. I mentioned, right, had significantly become sophisticated over the past 5 years. I think the other part that we thought was the same thing could be applied for the non-e-commerce logistics as well, right? The conventional transportation of FMCG products, consumer durables, all of those things, right? They were still a little bit more one generation behind, right? So I felt that this network could be something that we could develop not just for e-commerce, but extending into beyond e-commerce as well, right? Where there are at least, where you can instantly if you just copy paste what you have on e-commerce, it would be like a huge shift for them, huge forward shift for them, right? So these were the 2-3 thoughts on the basis of which we started LoadShare. And it's still, by and large, I think, still philosophically, we are true to this. But obviously, we've evolved and we've taken, we've kind of kept in pace with the times and the changing market conditions to figure out both newer opportunities as well as to kind of refine what is things that we thought would work very well back then, but are perhaps not relevant as much now.
So thank you for walking us through those three pillars. But would like to dive in a bit more into that initial journey and how you got your first customers. I mean, you spoke about bringing the kind of e-commerce sophistication to FMCG and food delivery companies. What were the initial pain points that you were solving for them, and how did you go about getting your first few customers?
Yeah. So first customers were e-commerce customers only. So our thought process was, we understood, at least back when I started, we just didn't understand non-e-commerce at all, right? So we said, let's kind of park the non-e-commerce idea for now till we build a base network on the back of what we already understood, which was on e-commerce. And that's something that we started. So therefore, the first customers were the e-commerce customers themselves, and where my initial proposition to customers was, I will solve your biggest pain point. And I think that's again a learning that I've had over life is, you have to go, and to stand out, you have to solve a very unique pain point for the customer, right? So you can't, as a logistic, we started in 2017, and as a logistics company then, we couldn't kind of go and tell any of our customers saying, I will solve your Bangalore problem, right? So we had to, and I could clearly, my theme was also not about solving Bangalore problems at that point. So what I did was, I went to customers and I said, I'm going to solve your biggest logistics problem, which is Northeast. And this gave me access to all the, like, whoever, like I had no business, just no network, nothing at that point. But when I spoke and said, I'm going to solve your Northeast problem, they said, what kind of a guy is this, right? I mean, who's this? This is a pitch that they never heard before, right? And that's because that was the biggest problem area. So it was a good kind of a tip of the spear for us to get in and to engage with customers on the biggest pain point and solve that problem, and then use that as a base for opening up. In fact, we didn't have to do anything else after that, right? Customers themselves, they saw what we did in the Northeast, and they started pulling us into different other regions, right? And therefore, we've almost spent $0 in any form of sales or marketing per se for the longest time, right? So that's been a like the first set of customers came from there. And when we started doing this and solving for last mile in the Northeast, then the same e-commerce customers came and said, look, you're solving the last mile problem for us, but why don't you also help us connect to the last mile from that state capital? Because that was also a pretty broken ecosystem, right? So for example, imagine from Guwahati to, let's say you are saying, I will solve Dimapur, which is in Nagaland, right? I will solve the Dimapur last mile. But same customers came back and said, hey, can you actually help me solve the Guwahati to Dimapur problem also, which is a trucking problem, right? And that's what we started doing, right? And we just kind of got drawn into it. We could see the power of this, and that same truck could carry e-commerce as well as e-commerce shipments in a part load manner, right? So that was the unique solution that we built over there. And from then, while we started 2017, 2018, mid 2018 is when we started playing out the non-e-commerce side of it, where we started working with some of the non-e-commerce customers and said, look, I have this intercity trucking solution that I've built out where I'm doing it for e-commerce customers, which means it is top of the line in terms of speed and customer experience and sophistication, etc. Would you also like to kind of make use of it? And they were all kind of very keen to try it out because they knew that their logistic systems were a little antiquated, or not antiquated, but at least they were still not as sophisticated as what the e-commerce systems were, and they wanted to kind of try that out, right? So that's how we got access to customers, and we again went to them with the same place where we which is again the pain point for them as well. It's the Northeast is not just a pain point for the e-commerce customers, but for non-e-commerce as well. So that's where we kind of started doing for them. Now what we've started doing is, as the market is maturing on the non-e-commerce side, we are finding, for example, now we are running a project with one of the largest FMCG companies in India, where in a state capital, we are basically doing the entire last mile deliveries, right? Which was typically done by distributors, right? And you have models where some companies have come up and said, we've become the distributor ourselves. And that's a new channel that gets opened up. But what we are saying is that we will work. Your distributor does what he does in terms of market making, giving credit in the market. So we're not displacing your distributor, but we realize that the logistics that he's able to offer, it needs to be can be quite upgraded, and therefore carve out logistics from his scope and give it to us. We will do the entire last mile for you, while the distributor does the remaining elements of what he's supposed to do, right? So that's the way in which it is evolving on the non-e-commerce side. It's still a work in progress because non-e-commerce the margins that they play with are very, very slim, and therefore, and it's a fairly efficient supply chain over the years. What people also don't realize is that while they say India logistics is inefficient, I don't think it is that inefficient either, right? So, and some of the FMCG guys have just kind of made their logistics quite efficient. So you still, but it comes sometimes at the cost of service, which is now becoming increasingly important. So getting that service and cost trade-off is what we are now kind of helping solve for them in a different way in the intracity domain as well, besides what we're doing for them on the intercity side. So the first customer, to short answer to your question is, and I think for anybody who's thinking about how best you start doing something, is just figure out what is your potential customer's biggest pain point, and that is your way to enter in, right? Because otherwise, if you go and do something incremental on something that is well solved for them, I don't think you get as much traction.
No, and to tie this back to the open water analogy, I mean, it's you need to choose a really good starting point, solve a big problem for your customers, and then you need to listen to your customers and kind of go with the flow and go where the currents take you.
Absolutely.
So now to kind of talk about the other side of that, LoadShare actually invests a lot in onboarding riders as well. And Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how do you go about onboarding them, and what role does that play in your overall uh,
Yeah.
ecosystem and
Yeah.
your offering?
So sure. So just to put it in perspective, right? So we do roughly 300,000 orders delivered every day on the last mile, and we work with a fleet on a weekly active basis of around 20,000 odd riders, right? So it's safe to say that for the largest part of our business, riders are the lifeblood for us, right? How do we get delivery boys on board? How do we ensure retention? How do we ensure that they are getting paid well? How do we ensure that they feel they're working with a trusted company? I think these are all this is pretty much at the core of what we solve for, right? So you're right, getting riders and retaining them and getting output productivity from them is the core problem that we solve. How we do it is we basically have multiple channels. If we start a new city, let me go back to how we started a new city. At that time, we would actually go and work with, there are many manpower service providers, right? So we'd kind of work with them to say, okay, give me X boys, right? And those X boys would work on our platform, and we'd funnel in demand multiplexed across a Swiggy or a Zomato or a e-commerce company or a grocery company to them, and they'd kind of do the deliveries, right? And they get paid by the delivery. In some cases, in the beginning, when demand is unclear, we have to put out some kind of minimum guarantee so that they feel comfortable and develop some trust in working with us rather than saying, I don't know what is going to come today, right? But over time, what we do is we variabilize the payout to them. So we basically, because get paid by order, and we keep a commission for ourselves and a margin for ourselves, and then we pass on the rest to the riders, right? And we also expand the channels that we work with, right? And to now, our largest way of getting riders for us is through referrals, right? We now already have a stock of delivery boys who work with us, and the guys who are happy and satisfied and therefore stay on, they kind of spread the word. And we have systems built by how they can do a referral program within themselves to get their friends, their relatives, whoever they are, their acquaintances to come on board and say, hey, look, I'm making so much, you also come on board and there is opportunity, and these guys will pay you fairly and they'll give you enough demand, and there's it's a good company to work for. They spread the word, and that becomes the largest source of the new flow of delivery boys, or the new kind of set of delivery boys that we get onboarded. We also have tried multiple different things, right? Because now, again, since COVID, since 2020, I would say we said we're not going to only work in the tier 3, 4 kind of locations, because we felt that the supply demand gap had become like there was enough demand for delivery boys that started coming up in the main cities like a Bangalore, etc. And we started saying, look, let's not kind of hold firm on only doing tier 3, 4 and not go where the opportunity is, which is the tier 1, tier 2 cities as well at that time. So we expanded into Bangalore, Delhi, all of these places. And there, what we found now is actually it is not so easy to get a delivery boy, right? Who in the they have their expectations. I want to get at least, let's say, $800 per day or $1,000 per day. There's like that expectations are there. So we've kind of said we will also expand our pool to add new supply to the delivery boy supply that exists in these cities by actually going and doing rural migration, right? So we have now a big program where we work with one of the state governments to actually, with their assistance, do job fairs, recruit delivery boys, put them on book train tickets for them, get them into Bangalore. We have hostels that we have kind of arranged or set up for them. We arrange for them. They just have to land up with a mobile phone, right? Their accommodation is sorted. We provide electric bikes for them, and they just have to switch on their mobile, and they get the accommodation, food, and bike is sorted, right? So just come, plug into the whole thing, and you start earning from day one, right? There's obviously a little bit of training that they do on the job. So we have expanded our supply pool from earlier just saying, hey, let me go and work with a manpower service provider over there and get him to provide me people to, and all of these coexist, right? And the ratios vary. But now this rural migration program is something that we're doing, trying to ramp it up so that this becomes a source of some competitive advantage or edge for us, right? As we kind of because this is the heart of what we do, right? If we get labor supply, to call it that way, at a lower cost, then I think that's a massive, and we are able to cross utilize that delivery boy across not just for food, but food, e-commerce, grocery, everything else, right? Pharma, right? That's a massive source of advantage, and that's what we are kind of. That's the holy grail for us, right? So that's what we are building towards.
Amazing. No, thanks so much for explaining it. And I mean, that's incredible. The depth to which you guys have gone and how you've managed to kind of expand the supply, as you put it.
Yeah. So we never thought. I mean, I never thought that this is what we'd end up doing when we started, right? This is like it's a people supply chain that in a way we are running now.
Just to add to that, you mentioned that this is one of the most exciting times for a logistics startup. What are some of the macro factors that make it such a disruptable sector for startups in general, and maybe for other aspiring entrepreneurs? What are some of the ways that they can think about the logistics sector overall?
Yeah. So I think and it's a trap also, but the size of the sector is unbelievable, right? It is 14% of maybe 13-14% of India's GDP, right? That's not a small number, and that just tells you that you can take multiple slivers to it, but you will still have a large enough problem that you're dealing with, or large enough opportunity that you're working on. That's one, I think, but many people have fallen to that and said large segment, that large TAM means you can build a great business. I don't think that's also fully correlated. But I'll just step back as to why I think it's such a interesting and a large opportunity. And you have to put this in perspective over time, right? Like I said, right, 2011, I lost my passport because of poor logistics, right? And 2015, I just saw, like, in 4 years, what's the delta that's happened from 2015, 2016, where I remember in Myntra, we were trying to push our delivery boys to use the mobile for marking deliveries, right? This was a time when still people would have a piece of paper, they will go, they will mark it, and they will say, the customer has to sign. This is still the time in Bangalore, huh? It's 2016 that I'm talking about. Now, this is now 2022, 23. I think I can safely say we operate in parts of the country that nobody has like heard the names of, right? This is a deep tier 3, 4. People work across the board are working on mobile, right? And working efficiently and doing fairly complicated stuff, including all kinds of payments, returns, exchanges. All of those things are just being done on mobile, right? Also, to just maybe give a bit of perspective, in 2017, when we used to go to Guwahati for just like starting our operations over there, the Bangalore boys, right, spoiled at 9 o'clock, we'll feel hungry and we'll say, ki, chalo, abhi kuch order karte hain, right? And there's no Swiggy there, no Zomato there, right? And literally the city shuts down at 8 p.m. You can't find it. If you have to eat something, you'll have to maybe go to a 5-star hotel, right? That's about it, right? There's no restaurants that are open. And now if I look at Guwahati, and forget about Guwahati, there are places I'll tell you which Guwahati would be doing easily, I think, for like food deliveries would be maybe 20,000 orders a day, easily, right? On any given day. There are places we've launched. So for example, we just recently launched Srinagar in Jammu Kashmir, right? We launched Port Blair in Andamans. We launched many parts of Northeast. There's a place called Golaghat. Nobody knows about it, right? Now, Golaghat does 300-400 orders a day. There's a place called Dumka, which is near, like it's in Jharkhand, where we do food delivery, which does like 300-400 orders a day. I can't just imagine it, right? And forget about and so that's the kind of change that has happened in the past few years itself, right? So now if we extrapolate, 5 years back, I think to track a truck using a GPS, everybody said there was GPS, but it was just not as prevalent at all. It was not really sorted. So if I look at the state of affairs back then, and I look at what exists now, for me, that's like the biggest source of excitement, motivation, opportunity, that look, if this is what has happened in 5-10 years, the rate of change is only going to accelerate from now on, right? So you can now imagine, I would not make a prediction that look, by 2030 there would be drones flying all over. Maybe that's a little bit off, but not too much, right? Maybe it's not drones because of for multiple reasons, but I think there will be substantial changes that would have happened in overall logistics, consumer behavior, consumer demand patterns, and channels by which they are being serviced. Of which, no matter what channel you take, it has to ultimately reach the customer, right? And therefore, there is a logistics is a very, very clear derivative of whatever changes that are happening in overall commerce. So if you're betting on overall commerce in India growing, and commerce in India growing in general, and share of e-commerce in whatever form or shape increasing, I think logistics is a direct derivative of that, and therefore it will naturally grow, and it will naturally offer those opportunities for new interesting opportunities that people should be watching. Or now electric, as you can now see, there's so much of stuff that is happening on electric, right? It's still kind of we don't know where it will be 1-2 years down the line, but I can pretty much say that 5 years, 6 years down the line, we're looking at an all electric fleet, which comes with its own sets of new challenges, opportunities, etc. That
These
you have to be kind
secondary
of on the
opportunities, right?
ball.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah.
have to be on the ball to
Obviously.
be able to capture them, right? So therefore, I feel just by driven by India macro, and just having the benefit of hindsight over having seen how logistics was 10 years back and now, I feel supremely excited that there are many interesting things that are there. That doesn't take away the fact that it is a challenging sector, right? Its value creation here is not easy, and therefore I think it's important to also keep in mind that, as you say, right, if to finish first, you have to first finish, right? You have to be in the race. You have to be. So that's what I tell my team, that if you find a way to sort through all kinds of momentary tides and kind of make our way as a strong company, we make it to 2030, there's a pot of gold that is waiting for us over there, right? So I am just supremely convinced on the opportunity. It doesn't take away the fact that you have to be tactically smart and maneuver through all kinds of challenges that will come, including the current quote unquote downturn that is facing all of us, right? So, but yeah, I think long term, I'm absolutely bullish. And in fact, I would say if somebody's thinking about doing something in logistics now, it's not a bad idea at all, right? Because I also think that over the past 3-4 years, I don't know how many logistics companies have come up, right? So, we started in 2017. I really can't think of many more logistics companies that have started after that, because it's also a tough sector to play it out. So therefore, I do think that being in the game and playing it well enough, there is a large opportunity waiting for whoever is in logistics. And returns in logistics are a lot more like back-ended, right? Like, unlike many consumer companies, it's not like logistics companies grow up suddenly and become big in 2 years kind of stuff. It takes time to build. Yeah, but I'm just to the original question, this is the reason why I feel quite excited about the longer term
No,
opportunity.
no, that
Yeah,
that makes sense, and I think it's a good segue into ONDC. If you could talk about what you think, because you're talking about future of logistics, and it's a
yeah,
big potential change, as well as LoadShare's future and relationship to that.
yeah. So ONDC, we were the first, uh, partners for ONDC. In fact, the first logistics order onwards has been kind of done by us. So we are big believers. If I think about changes that have happened, or big things that have happened on commerce and in logistics over the past few years, I think this is as significant as any, right? And the potential of this, if it plays out, is quite transformational, right? And it is because of what the name itself indicates. It's an open network for digital commerce and selling of goods and services. And there is no open network that exists in the country right now for this, right? There are large and very, very high performing, at least customer experience wise, marketplaces that exist, but they're not open, right? And they therefore are addressing a large segment of the they're addressing a segment of commerce, but they're not addressing the entire segment of commerce that is there. And ONDC holds the promise of unlocking a much larger set of opportunities, right? I'll give you a small example, right? I heard from one customer of ours that they met Vidyarthi Bhavan, which is a popular restaurant in Bangalore. And when they Vidyarthi Bhavan, if you can go there on a weekend and you will not get, like, you'll have a half a kilometer line, right, to get in. But they also obviously get shipments from a Swiggy, or they service through a Swiggy or a Zomato, the food platforms. But when it reaches the customer, it already gets marked up quite a bit, right? Logistics charges and whatever, all the other charges. Of course, the marketplaces, for the value that they add, they have to, put their charges on restaurants or on the customer. Whereas interesting things that can be done, which can be opened up by ONDC, is, for example, you can have a case of saying you order on ONDC on uh, Vidyarthi Bhavan. He will give you a token, you come after 30 minutes and you collect it. Many customers are happy to do that, right? They don't want to spend like 50, 60 bucks on logistics, and you add the platform commissions, or it becomes like a little bit, I would say the 30 rupee idli becomes like a 90 rupee idli, right? It's not everybody is like, not everybody wants to go and do that, right? They would want to say 30 rupees, मैं आके collect कर लूंगा, right? Or 30 rupees with no more markups on the food menu price, but just I'm okay to pay that 30 rupees for logistics, right? And you give it to me in 30 minutes, 35 minutes, it's okay, right? So these are all things that can, for use cases from grocery to food to pharma, right? It just, and to services. I think there are many things. For example, I mean, you can have this being opened up to communities like MyGate, right? I mean, MyGate can get on ONDC. They have a customer base, and you can open up a network of multiple merchants where MyGate can then, become like the marketplace, right? So I think it just makes it much more accessible. So, for example, if you want to buy Diwali lights, you won't get it on an Amazon or Flipkart, and you won't want to have it like, if the Diwali light order is placed, maybe it's coming from a seller that is 2 kilometers away from, let's say I'm in Kormangla, it's coming from somewhere in Indranagar. But the flow would be that it would go from there, it'd be picked up by a marketplace, it'd be taken to their main hub 20 kilometers away, and then it'll come back and get delivered the next day, right? So these are all flows that are very different compared to what a hyperlocal flow, which an ONDC enables much more easily, right? Whereas I can open up a buyer app on ONDC, and I can just I can discover that shop, I can place an order, and that shop would either have a marketplace, a logistics connection that they would use for sending it, or I can choose, right? So the degrees of freedom that come up for a small store, a small seller, and though that small seller would never be entertained, I would say, on a large marketplace, right? It's not easy for him to be discovered or even entertained or listed. Forget about discovered, even listed on a large marketplace. And ONDC enables that because that's in a way their purpose, right? Their purpose is to open up to a larger segment of sellers. And you can take, for example, grocery. Grocery is, the large marketplaces have tried in terms of multiple models, right? So quick commerce will have a selection of items that are there available easy for you, great value, but doesn't solve for long tail, right? Where you want a particular type of thing, you won't have it over there, right? You would get it at the local Kirana guy. And now that local Kirana guy finds a way to get on board on ONDC through a seller app, and there are buyer apps. It could be a Paytm, it could be a Phone Pay, it could be whoever else who's coming out with buyer apps. They would kind of help them get discovered in a way which was not possible earlier, right? So also, I would say, just purely technology integrations wise, ONDC provides solves a fundamental problem, because now what has happened is most of the marketplaces and most of the folks have kind of built their own walled gardens, and they don't allow for easy integrations across, right? So, for example, if there's a famous sporting goods store which also does online deliveries. I had to buy a kid's helmet because it got broken. I thought it'd come in like 2-3 hours. They said, I'm going to charge you 50 bucks, but I'm going to pay. Yeah, but you'll get it in 3 days. It just doesn't work. It's 2 kilometers from my house. Right now, we went to them later as a logistics company. I said, look, I could have done it for you. I could have done it in like the 40 rupees, and I can deliver to the customer in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe an hour, right? So why don't you do it? He says, I can't do the tech integration. My question is, why not? Because he's saying, look, it's just so complex, right? And because everybody has their own protocols, in a way, formats and languages in which they've done their way to integrate commerce and logistics. But what ONDC gives as a means is, once everybody comes on board on that protocol, you can actually make it a lot more faster and a lot more easier, right? So you don't need to do one integration for each logistics service provider. You write into ONDC, we write into ONDC, and instantly, in a way, it's a just one configuration or one turn of a switch away from that integration happening, which just opens up and makes the entire thing a lot more accessible and a lot more open, right? So we believe in this vision quite a bit. I'm a very strong believer that this is one of the things that's going to play out over the next couple of years. It's not going to be an instant journey. I think it's a long journey because I think one of the things that needs to be solved for, given so many moving parts, is on customer experience. There are places where it can slip, and that needs to be fully covered. But once that is kind of set in place, the amount of commerce that it can unlock is actually quite astounding. And all of this will need, because it is more of the hyperlocal intracity, my also hypothesis is that it will be a lot more applicable for intracity in the beginning than it will be for intercity. And therefore, the amount of opportunity that comes up for us is quite a large one. And therefore, we are saying, look, we continue to be, we were bullish on this concept. We continue to be very bullish. We understand that there are going to be lots of challenges in the uptake for this, and it's a journey, right? But we think that long term, this is one of those more important kind of inflection points that is coming up in our country's evolution on e-commerce.
Understand. And just to close out, and why we call this Founders Unfiltered, what's one piece of unfiltered feedback you've received during your journey, your career, as well as your time as a founder, which really changed your perspective? And brutal and honest,
Yeah,
one is good.
I think many, but I would say the one thing that just strikes me is, uh, see, as a founder, you're going to have highs and lows. As a not just as a founder, as a company, you're going to have highs and lows. But as a founder, I think it is very important for you to ooze optimism and positivity from every pore of the body, right? This is at least one feedback or one piece of input that I got, which was, I think, very important, right? And very critical. Because ultimately, see, you are the as a founder, as a co-founder, you are the captain of the ship, right? People across the board are looking at you, saying, look, we need to get direction and positivity from you. That doesn't mean that you kind of just be positive when there is like bad news, right? Or being positive versus, like, it's important to be positive in whatever circumstance, but doesn't mean that you have to be kind of just putting out an artificial front of everything is hunky dory, right? That's not what it means. What it means is, even if things are not hunky dory, you have to be a problem solver. You have to figure out a way to say, how do you navigate out from there, right? So that's, I think, a very important uh, expectation, or what something that's advice that I got from one of my board members, that, look, it's important for you to be the one who's radiating that positivity, because everybody else will draw comfort from that, and if you don't have that, then you've lost half the battle, right? So I think that's a very important piece of feedback, and that, I think, holds pretty much not just about entrepreneurship, it's about every senior role, I think. And it's also, I would say, equally applicable in personal life, right? I mean, you have a family. I think it's your kind of important duty to be positive and make sure that you keep yourself in a positive mind frame, so that you're able to give comfort and guidance and direction to other people who are looking up to you for that.
Understand. Awesome. Thank you so much, Raghu, for your time. I think we learned a lot about the journey of starting up as well as logistics in India. So thank you for sharing so openly.
Wonderful, Aviral, Mazin. I really enjoyed chatting with you guys.